Yeah. Oh, I should be in the other chair probably. Is that better? Okay. Right. Thanks. Okay. Good afternoon and welcome to Grief Support Group. Y'all are getting a little bit of a behind the scenes glimpse with our new technology. Um, I'm Laura. I'm the chaplain. If you haven't met me and you'd like to talk, let me know. But this is a time for us to be together as folks who have experienced grief. I know we are not together in the same space, but we are together in the same time right now. And there are many of you. There are many folks around this place that have experienced grief, that are going through some stage of their grief journey. And so this is a time for us to be intentional about it. It's with you always, but sometimes it's good to notice and notice where you are and notice where you've come from. So as you arrive in this moment, as you come to this place in this time, I'm going to invite you to take care of yourself in this time. So if you need to do a little stretching or wiggling in your seat to find a comfortable space, please do that. You may want tissues or water or a journal, something to write with at hand. And as we begin, I want to invite you to take a few deep breaths and notice where you are today. Notice what's going on with your spirit right in this moment. And maybe if it feels good to you, notice where your grief journey has taken you this week, what the last week has been like in your grief journey. If that's too big of a question, just take a few deep breaths and notice where you are right now, right in this instant. We have been using these books by Kenneth Hawk. He is the founder of Stephen Ministries. And it's a series called Journeying Through Grief. We're on book 4, which is Rebuilding and Remembering. This is the book that he has written for folks who are in their second year of the loss. And so, as you might guess, rebuilding and remembering, there's a beginning of a look toward the future. Even as we encounter this together, this book, I want to remind us that wherever you are in your own grief journey, that's where you are. You have all kinds of permission to be exactly who you are in this moment, to feel what you feel. And so some of this may feel out of reach, maybe something you desire, maybe it's something you've experienced but you don't feel right now, or maybe it is something that will resonate with you. But even if it doesn't resonate with you, that's okay. Give yourself permission to soak it in, maybe find a little piece of wisdom in it, and remind yourself that you are unique in your grief journey. We're beginning with chapter 4 today, Rebuilding Your Life. And I'll read a chapter, and then we'll spend a little bit of time in silence. That's a good time for you to jot down some reflections or a question for yourself, or just reflect in silence. Rebuilding Your Life. A woman whose husband died told me about a time when she first realized she'd turned a corner in her grief. One day I found myself laughing, and for just a moment I had a glimpse of joy. It was then I began thinking that perhaps, just perhaps, I could make it. Over the next several weeks, the thought kept growing in my mind and gradually changed from perhaps I can make it to I am going to make it. Sooner or later, most grieving people reach a point when they begin to spend less and less energy on simply surviving the loss and begin to spend more and more time rebuilding their life, often a very different life than the one they had before. Here's a quote by Gerald Sitzer. Out of my pain, God became a living reality to me as never before. In one sense, we begin rebuilding our lives the moment our loved one dies. But rebuilding doesn't begin in earnest until we've sifted through the majority of the feelings, memories, and issues that resulted from our loss. Only then do we have the strength and footing to begin putting our whole self back into daily life and looking to the future. Rebuilding doesn't mean your life goes back to exactly what it was before. Life can never be the same because of the loss you've experienced. Rebuilding means picking up the pieces and putting them together again, but probably in a very different way because a significant piece of your life is missing and cannot be replaced. Here's a quote by Bethel Crockett. I learned to trust that through God's grace something beautiful and new would emerge, even in the face of my weakness, tears, pain, and hopelessness. I too would live again. Rebuilding usually begins to happen slowly. Exactly when this transition starts to take place depends on many variables. What are the timing and circumstances of your loss? What was your relationship to the loved one who died? How much time and energy did you have to invest in your grief during the past year? How much support did you have from others? Many of the people I've talked with said they began rebuilding somewhere between 1 and 2 years after their loss. But again, everyone is different. You may be approaching that transition now, or perhaps it's still somewhere down the road. Either way is perfectly fine. You'll begin rebuilding your life when the time is right for you. A quote from Jeremiah, I will bless you with a future filled with hope. Question for reflection in that chapter. What has rebuilding your life looked like for you? Or what might rebuilding your life look like for you? Are there any signs in your life right now that might point in that direction? Chapter 5, Continuing Bonds. Love doesn't die, only people do, one grieving mother told me. I'll always love my daughter and take comfort in the fact that somehow, in some way, she'll always be loving me. Experts used to say that people who were grieving needed to emotionally disconnect from the person who died in order to move on with their lives. More recent thinking recognizes that the relationship with a loved one doesn't really end, it changes. Part of what we do during grief is to develop a new relationship, a continuing bond, in which we don't disconnect from our loved one, but instead reconnect with him or her in a new and different way. This doesn't mean that we deny that the person has died, or that we act as if he or she is still alive. Indeed, we let go of our loved one in a physical sense, acknowledging that he or she is gone and that we can no longer have the kind of relationship we once had. Yet at the same time, we hold on to him or her in new and different ways, spiritually and emotionally, through our thoughts, memories, and feelings. There's a quote by Dennis Klass. Death ends a life, but it does not end a relationship. There are as many ways to have a continuing bond with a loved one as there are people in the world, so I can't tell you exactly what this new relationship will be like for you. Your continuing bond with your loved one will be different from anyone else's. I thought it might be helpful, though, for you to hear examples of some of the ways other grieving people have described their continuing bond. One man said, "Whenever my family gets together, we share dad stories. We laugh and cry and relive fond memories together. He's still very much a part of our lives." There's a quote from an Irish headstone. "Death leaves a heartache no one can heal. Love leaves a memory no one can steal." A woman who lost her husband said, "We are bonded forever through our 2 sons. As I watch them grow up and become the men we hoped they'd be, I know he's very proud of them. Some days I can look into their eyes and see him." A grieving father told me, "Waiting for a flight one day, I looked over my shoulder and saw a boy who was about the age my son would have been had he lived. The boy was looking right at me for a moment. It surprised me that instead of feeling sad, I felt comforted, almost as if my son was there. The warm feeling stayed with me all evening long. It was a gift from God." There's a quote by Henry Scott Holland. "I have only slipped away into the next room. I am I and you are you. Whatever we were to each other, that we still are." A woman described how her grandmother remains part of their Thanksgiving traditions. "We use Grandma's secret recipes to keep her a part of the festivities. We'll say, 'Here, have some of Nana's scrumptious apple pie.'" Another man said, "I remember how my grandfather would think, so I use him as an example of how I live my own life. When something comes up, I'll think about what he'd do in that situation. So I really feel I still have his gentle guidance in my life. I also try to pass on his values to my own children. They never got a chance to meet him, but I can let them know what he was like, so he can still be a significant influence in their lives." A grieving wife said, "My husband's lounge chair is my special need a hug place. I curl up in that seat to feel close to him." One man whose wife died sometimes lights scented candles in the evening, just as she used to do. He said, "It helps me feel close to her." A grieving mother told me, "When I close my eyes and pray, I can feel my son kneeling and praying right beside me. Prayer has become my link to him." A man whose best friend died while they were in college told me, "Whenever I achieve a milestone in my life, I think about him, and in that way make him part of the celebration." A woman who lost both of her parents in an automobile accident said, "It may sound silly, but when I pray, I ask God to let my mom and dad know how much I still love them and miss them. It comforts me and helps me feel close to them." 29 years later. A man whose wife died just a few months before their granddaughter's wedding gave his granddaughter a string of pearls that had belonged to her grandmother. He later told me, "My wife had wanted to be at that wedding so much. When my granddaughter walked down the aisle wearing those pearls, it felt as if, in some way, she really was there." Here's a quote from 1 Corinthians. "Love always protects, always trusts, always hopes, always perseveres. Love never fails." Your continuing bond with your loved one may be similar to one or more of these, or completely different. It might not even involve any conscious thoughts or actions on your part, and may simply be an occasional feeling of closeness you have in your heart. Whatever it is, it will be unique to you. Although we'd much rather have our loved one physically with us, it's reassuring to know that we don't have to completely let go. God has blessed us with thoughts, memories, and a love more powerful than death itself. Through these gifts, our loved one can forever remain a cherished part of our life. A question for reflection on this section. In what way what ways do you continue to experience a relationship with the one you lost? Chapter 6. The challenges of change. Change is difficult. Change means leaving the familiar behind and stepping out into the unknown. I don't know if anyone likes to do that. One of the most challenging aspects of losing a loved one is that the loss brings about many changes. Changes in the way you live, and maybe even changes in the way you think. A big part of your journey through grief is adjusting to these changes. Some of the changes are temporary. The fog of grief, for example, eventually lifts, and you are able to think, concentrate, and remember like your old self. Some of the changes are permanent. The loss may have left a huge hole that affects how you live your daily life, and you are simply unable to return completely to your former way of doing things. A grieving husband told me, "Sometimes I don't know who I am anymore." He had lost that part of himself that was a husband to his wife, and he was struggling without that part of his identity. Perhaps you've gone from being a we to an I, or maybe you're now a member of the oldest generation in your family. The loss may mean that now you have to redefine the way you think of yourself. The loss of a loved one can change the dynamics of the entire family. The remaining family members may need to find a new balance, as well as take on responsibilities previously handled by the person who died. You also face the challenge of finding new outlets for the energy and emotions you used to invest in your loved one. They're like a river that's dammed up and can't flow in the direction it wants to go. While you can't replace your loved one, the love, attention, and energy you gave to him or her need new places to go. This may mean deepening existing relationships or making new friends. It may mean starting new hobbies or possibly finding a new occupation or calling in life. For some people, it may someday mean a new marriage. Again, the point isn't to replace your loved one. No one else will ever fill that special void, but to find new people or activities for the feelings and emotions you used to give to your loved one. The more you once had invested, the more you'll have to reinvest. Here's a quote by Candy Lightner. "Death changes us, the living. In the presence of death, we become more aware of life. It can inspire us to decide what really matters in life, and then to seek it." Another challenge is that well-meaning friends or relatives may resist some of the changes they see in you. They may not understand that it's impossible for you to be exactly the same person you were before the loss, or they may want you to change in a different way. A quote by Abraham Lincoln, "The best thing about the future is that it only comes one day at a time." The changes you face because of your loss are challenging indeed. While I can't make those challenges any easier, perhaps I can share a couple of thoughts to encourage you as you confront the changes you're facing. First, changes don't have to happen overnight, and they rarely do. If you're faced with a change that seems overwhelming or insurmountable, try a very gradual approach. Take it in small steps, little by little, one day at a time. A somewhat introverted man who lost his wife told me how at one point he felt very lonely and isolated. He wasn't sure how to begin making new relationships, but began by simply saying hello to the people he passed while walking his dog each evening. After a while, the hellos led to brief conversations, and the brief conversations led to some new friendships. In time, the cold, unfriendly neighborhood began warming up, and his feelings of isolation melted away. Here's a quote from Romans chapter 8. "For I am convinced that neither death nor life, neither angels nor demons, neither the present nor the future, nor any powers, neither height nor depth, nor anything else in all creation, will be able to separate us from the love of God that is in Christ Jesus our Lord." Second, as bad as the loss was, the changes that result don't have to be all bad. Often growth can occur as a result. One woman described her grief as a cocoon she entered when her mother died, a dark, lonely, painful time full of fears and doubts. She wondered if she would ever be happy or feel like living again. She told me it took her 2 years to emerge from her cocoon, but when she did, like a butterfly, she marveled at the beautiful changes within her. Sure, she'd much rather have had her mother back, but that wasn't possible. What she did have was a much greater appreciation for her life and loved ones, newfound strength and self-confidence, more empathy and compassion for others, a richer and deeper faith, and warm memories of her mother that would last forever. As you encounter changes in your life, tackle them in your own way and in your own time. Nobody knows better than you, so don't let anyone rush you to change or pressure you to become a certain way. Change in the way you need to change when the time is right for you. Question for this chapter for reflection might be, how have you navigated change in the midst of your grief? How might you navigate change at this time of your grief? I think we'll finish there for today. It's good that you have joined us. Soon, in a couple of weeks, we will be having an in-person meeting, so be thinking about that. If you have any questions about it, let me know. We'll do a similar kind of format. We'll have some things to read, short pieces to read, and then some discussion. You may be somebody who, I often hear that people don't want to come to grief support group because they're afraid they'll cry in front of people. And that's okay. Lots of people feel that way. But it's also crying in front of people who may also cry in front of you. Crying in front of people who know why it is that you're crying and who don't think it's a strange thing at all. And so as you go through these next couple of weeks, think about whether that would feel like a good thing for you to join together in the same place. In the meantime, we will continue with this book next week. As you transition into the rest of your day, maybe ask yourself what came from this session that you'd like to carry forward into your life. You might ask yourself what your body needs right now, what your spirit needs. My body, checking in, needs a glass of water and a little bit of a stretch. So check and see what you need and give your body and your spirit that. And this week, find a way to express in writing or dance or with a friend, some other creative way. Find a way to express what you're feeling so that it doesn't get stuck inside you. It's good to be with you. Blessings in this new week of your journey here on earth, your journey that includes your love and loss. You have my prayers. If you ever need to talk, please let me know. We'll find time. All right. Blessings.